What if I told you that the moment an empath stops shrinking themselves to fit into other people's lives, something irreversible gets set in motion? Stay with me. Because what Carl Jung discovered about energy, consciousness, and psychological frequency will completely reframe everything you thought you knew about sensitive people. Most people look at an empath and see someone overwhelmed, someone who cries at commercials, absorbs the mood of every room, and carries the weight of people who never asked to be carried. They see fragility. They see a burden. But Jung saw something else entirely. He saw the most sophisticated receiver of human experience that evolution has ever produced. And when that receiver stops tuning into low frequencies, what happens next is nothing short of extraordinary. Here's what nobody tells you about vibrational elevation in empaths. And by the end of this, you will never look at a sensitive person the same way again. Carl Jung understood that the human psyche operates like a living frequency. He called it psychic energy, libido in its broadest sense, a force that flows, accumulates, and transforms. Most people leak this energy unconsciously. They spend it on conflict, on people-pleasing, on relationships that drain more than they give. But empaths, Jung observed, carry an unusual capacity for what he called psychic amplification. They don't just experience energy. They multiply it. The problem is that for most of their lives, they've been multiplying the wrong frequencies. Think about what an empath does in a toxic environment. They feel the tension before anyone speaks. They absorb the anxiety of a room before the meeting even starts. They carry the grief of people who haven't admitted they're grieving yet. This isn't imagination. Jung called it the participation mystique, a deep, pre-rational merging with the emotional field of others. For years, this gift gets used as a survival mechanism. Feel the danger early, appease before the storm, shrink before you're told to. But here's where it gets fascinating. And this is the part that changes everything. When an empath begins to deliberately raise their own frequency, when they start choosing their environment, their relationships, their internal dialogue with intention, something Jung described as psychic individuation accelerates at a speed most people never experience. The same sensitivity that made them a sponge for other people's darkness becomes a rocket for their own ascension. Jung identified what he called the law of psychic compensation, the idea that the psyche always seeks balance, always. And for an empath who has spent years, sometimes decades, pouring their energy downward into people who took without giving, into situations that compressed instead of expanded, the compensatory rebound when they shift direction is seismic. They don't just rise, they launch. The empath who starts vibrating higher doesn't become a different person. They become the person they were before the world taught them to apologize for their depth. They remember what it felt like to be electric. And that memory, once reactivated, cannot be put back to sleep. But here's what will completely blow your mind about what happens next. According to Jung's research on psychological types, empaths dominant in what he called the feeling function don't process the world through logic first. They process it through resonance, through what fits and what doesn't, through what elevates and what diminishes. This means that when an empath raises their vibration, they don't have to think their way out of low-frequency situations. They feel their way out, instinctively, automatically, irreversibly. The people who used to drain them start to feel unbearable to be around, not because the empath has become cold, but because the contrast has become undeniable. The conversations that used to trap them in loops of negativity suddenly feel like static, like a radio station they've simply outgrown. Jung called this enantiodromia, the inevitable turning of things into their opposite when a threshold is crossed. The empath who was once a magnet for chaos becomes a magnet for clarity. The one who attracted people who needed saving starts attracting people who are already whole. And this is where it gets dangerous for anyone who was benefiting from keeping them small. Carl Jung observed that when a person accesses what he called their individuated self, their fully realized, shadow-integrated, authentic core, they become impossible to manipulate through the old tactics. Guilt stops landing. Emotional leverage stops working. The familiar scripts that once sent the empath spiraling now slide off them like water off glass. Why? Because manipulation requires a frequency match. The predator needs you to be operating from fear, from scarcity, from the desperate need to be accepted. But the empath vibrating higher has stepped out of that frequency band entirely. They're not fighting anymore. They're not defending. They're not explaining. They're simply unreachable. Jung said that the most radical act a sensitive person can commit is the full inhabitation of themselves. Not the performance of confidence, not the armor of detachment, but the real embodied, grounded certainty that what they feel is valid, what they sense is accurate, and what they carry is not a flaw to be corrected, but a gift to be directed. The empath who starts vibrating higher stops asking permission to take up space. They stop translating themselves into simpler versions for people who aren't ready for their depth. They stop making themselves quieter so that louder, emptier people can feel heard. And in that silence, that powerful chosen silence, something magnificent emerges. What Jung called the self with a capital S, the archetype of wholeness, the version of you that was never broken, only buried. The final transformation is what Jung described as the return to the source, and it is absolutely unstoppable. The fully elevated empath doesn't become less sensitive. They become precisely sensitive. They feel everything, but they're no longer at the mercy of what they feel. They've learned the difference between absorbing energy and reading it, between drowning in someone's pain and holding space for it without losing themselves. They become what Jung called an individuated channel, clear, directed, intentional. Their empathy stops being a wound and starts being a weapon, not against others, but for truth, for connection, for the kind of relationships that actually deserve what they have to offer. They no longer pour their light into rooms that prefer the dark. They no longer stay at tables where their frequency is treated as a problem to be managed. They rise, and they don't look back. Carl Jung spent his lifetime studying what happens when human beings stop performing and start becoming. He found again and again that the most powerful individuals were not the loudest, not the most dominant, not the ones who conquered others. They were the ones who conquered themselves. The empath who starts vibrating higher is the living proof of Jung's greatest discovery, that sensitivity, fully owned and consciously directed, is not a limitation. It is the most precise instrument of human perception ever developed. And once it's calibrated to the right frequency, there is no ceiling, there is no going back. There is only the extraordinary, unstoppable unfolding of someone finally becoming exactly who they were always meant to be.